I have been doing an inductive grammatical analysis with commentary from the Hebrew text of the Psalms and other texts in the Hebrew Bible. A number of them are available on my channel, my YouTube channel, under my name, Dr. Gary Stats. And now I am working my way through Psalm 105. We've done a number of the Psalms this way, looking at the linguistic, grammatical understanding, analysis, parsing, and commentary of the different Psalms. We've covered the Messianic Psalms, and we're doing other Psalms gradually in other texts. So if anyone is interested, they can find it on YouTube under my name, Dr. Gary Stats. I'm a retired seminary professor. I taught Old Testament and Hebrew for a number of years, and now I'm just continuing to share what I really enjoy doing, and that is looking at the Tehillim, the Psalms, in Hebrew, and trying to help others as they embark on their own study of Hebrew. So let me begin. We stopped last time at verse 22, and so we'll be picking up at verse 22 and following. Just to look a little bit at some of the vocabulary, we had already seen some of the words in Psalm 105. Zamar is to sing, sicha to talk is a word. Niflaot looks at like wonderful deeds or acts. Mofet is a sign or a wonder. Bachir means chosen or elect. We have Shevuah, which means oath. Hevel, portion. Uh, Mat means male or man. Ashak, to oppress or to wrong. Mashiach means anointed. Kevel is a collective singular that means fetters when Joseph was in prison. Imra means word or saying. Saraf means to test. Natar means to free. Moshel means ruler. Kinyan looks at possession, acquisition. Chacham means to make wise or teach wisdom. Para, to be fruitful. And then we have atzim, meaning atzam, meaning to be strong. Nakal, to deal, let's say, in a crafty way. Mofet again is sign. Chashak, meaning to be dark. Mara, to be rebellious or to rebel. Daga is fish. Sharatz means to swarm or team. Sephardeia, meaning frog. Cheder would be a chamber or a room. Arov means to we've already said that, to swarm. And then we have Cain, meaning lice or gnat. Geshem, rain. Barad means hail. Lehava, flame. Tehina means fig or fig tree. Arbe would be locust. Yelek would be another word for locust. Aseb meaning herb. And then Od means vigor. Pachad means fear or dread. And so we'll stop there. Those are the main words that we've looked at and what we'll be looking at. Let me just say a wonderful source that has helped me a lot is the Reader's Hebrew and English Lexicon of the Old Testament, and by Terry Armstrong, Douglas Busby, and Cyril Carr. And I want to give them credit. They've done a wonderful job. And I was using some of their vocabulary in sharing this with you. But now let me go to the text and look at where we stopped. As we look at this text, we have seen how the Lord is in his wonderful acts is, first of all, the psalmist, let me put it this way, is calling for a worship of praise to the Lord for what he has done. We see this in the first 6 verses. This is followed then by describing how he had been faithful to Abraham and his covenant promise. And we see this in beginning at verse 7 down through 11. And now we have looked at how he protected the patriarchs and how he cared for them. We continued that from 12 through where we stopped. And we came up to Joseph and how that Joseph was sold into Egypt, and he suffered in his time in Egypt before he was exalted to be a leader. And we stopped there at the end of verse 21, how Pharaoh made him Samu Adon Leveto. He placed him Lord of his house, Umoshel Becho Kenyano, that is, and a ruler over all of his possession. That's where we stopped last time. And so now we pick up in verse 22, Lexar Sarah ben Nafsho, Uzekenav Yechakim, that is, to bind his princes at his, literally in his soul or with his soul. And notice Lexor is from asar, meaning to bind. It is an infinitive construct from asar. And then the interesting, difficult phrase is to bind his princes in his soul or with his soul, benafsho. There is a difference of interpretation at this point. Some believe that he had the power to imprison others, as Pharaoh had done to him. This, for example, would be the view of Ibn Ezra, a medieval Jewish commentator. And this is found, by the way, in Cohen on the Psalms on page 347 in the Sonsino series of the Bible. But I would agree with the note that he has here. It is preferable to render to instruct, that being the understanding. In other words, to bind his princes in his soul, meaning to instruct them, and they then could be taught by him. And that seems to hit the parallel or fit the parallelism of the next phrase, Uzekenav Yechakim, that is, and to teach his elders wisdom. Notice Yechakim is from Hakam, to be wise, and here we have a PL imperfect, third masculine singular from Hakam. So that is, and teach his elders wisdom, Chacham, to be wise. Then in verse 23, Veyavo Yisrael Mitzrayim, Veyaakov Gar Be'eretz Cham. I'm going to read the Hebrew slowly And anyone that is following along, then I would encourage to repeat my pronunciation as I'm going through it. So we read verse 23, and Israel came into Egypt. Again, looking at when Jacob went into Egypt. Notice Vayavo is a cow imperfect third masculine singular from bo. So Israel came to Egypt, and Jacob, Vayaakov, notice the parallelism here between Israel and Yaakov. And Jacob, Gar, the Eretz Ham, sojourned in the land of Ham. That is in the land of Egypt. And this God is just your simple cow, uh, perfect third masculine singular from the root to sojourn, gur. So Jacob sojourned in the land of Egypt. Then in verse 24, Vayefer et amo me'od, vaya atzimehu mitzarav, and he increased his people greatly, or he greatly increased his people, and he made them more mighty or stronger than their enemies or their adversaries. Notice Vayefer is from para, to make fruitful or to increase in fruitfulness. Notice here we have the hifil imperfect third masculine singular from para with a vav consecutive or vav conversive. So he increased his people exceedingly, and we're looking back at what happened in Egypt. Vaya'ad simehu, and he made them strong, or we could say mighty for their adversaries. Notice here, atzam means to make strong or mighty. Here we have a hifil, imperfect, third masculine singular from atzam, followed by hu, the pronominal suffix third masculine singular. So he made them mighty from their adversaries, exceedingly mighty. We could look at this that he made them very fruitful, and really he made them that they were actually stronger than the Egyptians, their adversaries. Seems to be the thought here. Then we move on. He continues to track what happened in Egypt. Hafak labam lisno amo lahit nakel ba'avadav. That is, he turned their heart to hate his people, to deal in a crafty way or craftily with his servants. Notice hafak is the cow perfect third masculine singular from hafak. He turned their heart, that is the Lord, Yahweh. Lisno amo. Lisno is from sana, to hate. It is an infinitive, a cow infinitive construct from sana. So he turned their heart to hate his people and to deal craftily with his servants. Vahit nakel. Notice here we have, excuse me, excuse me. Basically, we have a hit pael infinitive construct in the hit nakel from nakal, to deal in a crafty way. Notice the hit prefix in the lamed, which puts it as an infinitive construct, hifil infinitive, or excuse me, hitpael infinitive construct. It is a hitpael stem, binyan. So he turned their hearts to hate his people, to deal craftily with his servants. This is interesting. We have to ask, what are we understanding this to mean? Uh, their heart, the Targum wants to render this, their heart turned to basically deal craftily with their with the Israelites. So their heart turned, hafat, and that's possible. Libam would then become the subject. Hafak would be sort of a collectivized singular. Their heart turned to hate his people, to deal craftily with his servants. And I prefer, I guess, I believe that translation, which I think, again, would agree with the Targum. Uh, the only other way one could understand it is that God is seen as sovereign, allowing this to happen so that he could deliver the Israelites. So he turned, would be referring to God himself, their hearts, to cause this to happen, to effect the deliverance. And so the psalmist would then be driving home the sovereignty of God at this point. One could go either way. I personally don't mind the rendering. Their heart turned to hate his people, to deal craftily with his servants, agreeing with the Targum there. So let's move on then, verse 26. Shalach Moshe Abdo, Acharon Asher Behar Bo. That is, he sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen. Notice Shalach is just your cow perfect, third masculine singular from Shalach, to send. And so he sent Moses, his servant, Eved becoming Abd in construct with O here, the pronominal suffix, third masculine singular. So he sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, uh, whom he had chosen. And notice Bahar here is the cow perfect, third masculine singular, but it's functioning in context as a pluperfect, that is, whom he had chosen. And then we move on to verse 27. Samuvam divrei ototav u mofatim be'eretz cham. Notice he placed in them words of signs, literally, and wonders in the land of Ham. And notice Samu is from seem, to place, a middle weak verb, third masculine singular, cow perfect, from seem. They placed in them literally words of wonders. And if we take that literal translation, the thought could be there was the teaching and the words accompanied by the signs. And so God used the words of Moses, and along with signs would be the way that one would understand the text. And that's a literal rendering of the text of the Hebrew. And wonders in the land of Ham. And then verse 38, Shalach Hoshek Vayachashik Velo Maru et Devarab. Notice he sent darkness, and it was caused to be dark. Notice here, Shalach means to sin, and it's from the root Shalach. It's the cow perfect, third masculine singular. He sent darkness, and he caused, you could supply it to be dark. He caused the darkness. Notice Yahashik here is the Hifil imperfect third masculine singular from Hashak. And here we have the Pathak followed by the Hirik. We have an AI thematic vowel pattern. So we have the Hifil imperfect third masculine singular with the Vav conversive or the Vav consecutive. So he caused the darkness, he sent darkness and he caused it to be dark. Velo maru et devarav, and that would be they did not rebel against his word. And notice maru here is from mara, meaning to rebel. And when we look at this particular setting here, or translation, it would look at Moses and Aaron not rebelling. And again, speaking of Ibn Ezra, that would be his approach here. They were going to be faithful to do their mission. Uh, it's basically it's sort of a difficult phrase because there was rebellion, but he sent darkness and he caused it to be dark, and they did not rebel against his word. And I notice Cohen has more probably it refers to the effect of the plague upon the Egyptians. Well, if we took it that way, it would almost seem that you would have to say they did not rebel initially, but they did rebel. It's a difficult phrase here, and I guess I would tend to go back to Ibn Ezra's point of view that they did not rebel, that is, Moses and Aaron, in spite of all that they had to go through in the darkness and what they would face. But at any rate, we go on then, verse 29, Hafak et memehim ladam, vayamet et degatam. That is, he turned their water to blood, and he slew or killed their fish. Notice again, Hafak is the cow perfect third masculine singular from Hafak. He turned their waters, by the way, mayim is the word for waters. When you have a plural construct, it becomes may, and then hem is your pronominal suffix, third masculine singular of that plural construct. So he turned their waters to blood and killed their fish. This is from Mut. And notice we have a cow imperfect, third masculine singular from that middle weak root here, and killed their fish, I should say. Dagatam. Daga means fish, and in construct, dagat, we have then your pronominal suffix, third masculine plural. So then we go on, he continues to list the plagues. Sharat, Atsam, Sefar De'im, Bechadrei Malchehim. That is, their land swarmed with frogs. And notice here, Sharatz means to swarm. It's a cow perfect third masculine singular. And their chambers, or the chambers of their kings. Notice Heder becomes Hadre, plural construct, with Malchehim, with their kings. So the two nouns are in construct here. So their land swarmed with frogs, and the chambers actually in the chambers of their kings. So we have the plague of the frogs, which we see again going back to the book of Exodus. So he's going through the plagues one by one, recounting what happened in Egypt. And then we go to verse 31. Amar veyavo arav kinim bechol gevulam. He spoke, and swarms, ado means swarms, came. There came swarms. And no doubt here the thought is swarms of flies. There came swarms. Or we could translate the next word, gnats, kinim, bechol gevulam. So we're looking now at the swarms of flies and gnats, if we follow that translation, that took place in their borders, the next plague. And then we continue, verse 32, Natan geshmehim barad, eish lehavot be'artsam. That is, he gave rain. He gave rain, we could almost say with hail, or he gave hail for rain. We'd almost have to have a preposition understood here. Natan legishmehim barad, or Natan gishmehim le barad, or le barad. That is, he gave for rain hail, or he gave their rain for hail, or into hail, either a lamed or a bait before barad. Then eish lehavot be'artsam, that is a fire flaming, or a flaming fire in their land. So we're looking, no doubt, at lightning here, at the seventh plague that occurred back in Exodus chapter 9. He's going back and tracking those plagues. Vayak Gefnam Ute'enatam Vayashaber Eitz Gevulam. That is, he smote their vines and their fig trees. Notice, and broke the trees, and here we have a singular noun that is a collective singular. Broke trees of their borders. And again, I believe Eitz is singular, looking at all of the trees, that many of them were broken. Notice Vayak, he caused to smite their vines and their fig trees, is from the root nakah, to smite. And notice here we have a pay noon verb in nakah, and a lamed hey. So it's like a doubly weak verb. And vayak, we've lost the noon here in the final hey. But that a vowel indicates a hifil stem. So it's a hifil imperfect third masculine singular from nakah. So he smote their vine and their fig trees and broke vayashaber eitz gevulam. He broke the trees of their borders. Notice vayashaber is from the root shabar, to break, and here we have a pl imperfect third masculine singular from shabar. Notice here we have a shabbat patha, a vowel pattern, plus the doubling of the middle radical and the bait. So he broke the trees of their borders. And then he spoke. We go to verse 34. Amar vayavo arbe vayelek ve'ein mispar. That is, he spoke, and locusts came forth, and the cankerworm, which is another word for locust, arbe and yelek. Joel will have different words when he talks about the locust plague. And let's say cankerworm and not with number or without number. Again, Amad is your cow perfect, third masculine singular from Amad. He spoke, and locust came. The locust came. Notice Yavo is from bo, a middle weak verb. Cow imperfect, third masculine singular from bo, with the vav consecutive or vav conversive. And the cankerworm, and without number, not with number. So innumerable or numerous locusts. And then notice what happens in verse 35. Vayachal kol esav be'artzam vayochal peri ad matam. Here we have, and it ate up every herb in their fields, and ate the fruit of their ground. So again, we're looking at the locust plague, and I guess when you have a locust plague, it can be a very, very bad thing. And we see this in Joel, for example. Notice Vayochal is the cow imperfect third masculine singular from Achal. And by the way, this is a pay olive verb. And in all of these pay olive verbs, the olive becomes quiescent or quiet. And actually, you move to an O vowel with the or following the prefix all the way through. We see this Vayomer in Genesis 1 repeated and so forth. So it ate all the herb of their land and ate the fruit of their ground. So again, we're seeing the 10th plague and what has happened or what happened in the Exodus. Then we move on to verse 36. Vayakol bachor be'artzam reshit lechol onam. That is, and he smote all the firstborn in their land, the first fruit of their strength, or the first, literally, of their strength. And I think fruit is understood here. Notice as we look at this again, Vayak is from Naka again, the Hifil imperfect third masculine singular from Naka. So he smote all the firstborn, Bachor, in their land, and the first, and we have to have like the first fruit of all their strength, understood. And again, I think what we're looking at here is God's judgment again, that or the plague, let me say, the final sad plague that happened right before Israel came out of Egypt. And then we move on, following the plague of the firstborn, to verse 37. And we're going to see here that basically God is going to bring them out, but bring them out with silver and with gold. Notice verse 37. Vayotziem bekesef v'zahav ve'ein bishvatav koshel. In other words, and he brought them forth with gold and silver, and there was none among the tribes who stumbled. Notice here we have Vayotziim from the root Yatsah. Historically, this was a Pei Vav root, Vasa. And here we have another Hifil. Historically, it would have been Yao Siem becoming Yotziem. The Patha and the Vav coalescing and forming a Holim Vav, a long O vowel in this Hifil imperfect stem. So he caused them to come forth with silver and gold. And this goes back to where when Israel left, the Israelites gave them silver, gold, sort of an interesting way. It's translated, they plunder, the Egyptians gave the Israelites silver and gold. They plundered the Egyptians. And I remember Calvin one time was saying that we need to take the things of the world and use it for the kingdom of God. And that would be study, learning, art, learning the best we can, and then applying it for the kingdom of God. I think is what he had in mind. And then Va'ain Bishvatav, notice here the tribes, his tribes, that is Israel's tribes, there was none who stumbled. Notice here, koshel is your participle, your cow participle, masculine singular from kashal. There was none that stumbled. And then we're told that even Egypt was glad when they left. Notice verse 39 or 38. Samach Mitzrayim Betsetam Ki Nafal Pakdam Aleihim. That is, Egypt was glad when they departed. And for their fear, the fear of them, we could say, had fallen upon them. Notice here, and we're going to stop at this verse. Samach is your cow perfect third masculine singular from samach, to rejoice. So Egypt rejoiced, Betsetam, when they went forth. This is from Yatsah, to go forth. And here we have an infinitive construct, a cow infinitive construct. And what you have here is the bait prefix, the inseparable bait prefix, looking at a temporal phrase here, when they went forth. And the yod drops out, yatsah, and we have sate in construct with and so in their going forth. And notice is your pronominal suffix third masculine plural. So Egypt rejoiced when they went forth, for their fear had fallen upon them. Ki nafal pakdam aleihim. And that's why they rejoice, because of all the plagues. And the dread of Israel then at that time, because of God causing these plagues that even fell upon the Egyptians. And the dread really of Israel, of Israel's God, of Yahweh at this time, what was happening. And notice Nafal is the cow perfect third masculine singular, but it's used in a pluperfect way here. For their terror or fear, that is fear of them, but actually fear of what Yahweh was doing, had fallen upon them, upon the Egyptians. Notice nafal is, well, we said a cow perfect third masculine singular, but it's used as a pluperfect. their fear had fallen upon them. So what we've looked at in these verses is the Lord's care for Israel in Egypt, and now bringing them out of Egypt and going before them in the desert. And that's what we'll pick up when we complete this psalm. So what we see is a history, a review of history, going back to the book of Exodus, where we see God's history spoken of, and what had happened, or Israel's history, and what had happened at the Exodus. So I'm going to stop there, and what we'll do is continue on to try to finish this, looking at the grammar and looking at parsing of forms and doing linguistic study with, of course, with commentary. And I would just encourage anyone that would like to do similar work and to follow me along. And also you can find, as I said, my grammars that we've done similar work with in the Psalms and also in other texts of the Hebrew Scriptures. Thank you very much.